Hello, Coach Stacy here. Thank you for joining me for the second video in our lecture series number 1, How to Write an Affirmative Policy Debate Case. Now, this is going to be a basic version of what we need to do. We're going to have another video and several lectures on how to improve writing cases. And this is going to be for the first type of affirmative case that we're going to write, which is a needs-based case. All right, let's just be honest. Writing an affirmative case is not actually writing an affirmative case. It's more about the research. It's more about the analysis. It's more about looking at the meta issues and being able to gather evidence from other sources to be able to tell your story of how you're solving problems. It's very specific. It's technical. For me, it's one of the most fun things about forensics. When I was a policy debater, I researched and wrote my own cases. I never used team cases just because I thought that you should put more effort into it. So I can write cases all day long. I will expect all of you to have your own individual policy case by December, but you will also have access to the team case if you want to use that, and generally just to teach you about speech and debate. We all have to begin somewhere. And where I like to begin is looking at the topic, looking at resolutional analysis, right? What is our topic and how are we going to approach that topic? For us, we have certain terms in the topic that are going to dictate what type of cases that we can write. And so when you look at federal, fiscal redistribution, you're going to deal with money allocated from the federal government, right? And you're going to be looking at where you can redistribute that money to solve problems. Okay, the resolution tells you where the areas you can allocate the money to, right? It's going to be through universal basic income, universal jobs guarantee, or Social Security. I keep saying Medicare because for some reason the National Speech and Debate Association's website has Medicare in one of their novice requirements, or because they have parameters for what novices can debate and limits. And Medicare is not Social Security. So I don't know if that's topical, but that's a debate for another day, right? The point being is that when you approach the topic, you have to look at the resolution. And when it says resolved, you have to look at who the actor is. Obviously, it's the United States federal government. And that's going to kind of key you into where you're going to begin your research, right? So obviously, it's a domestic topic. You're not focusing on international issues, which also means you're going to use domestic sources, which we'll get into later, okay? And you're going to begin by analyzing the resolution. And you're going to have to think about all of the different ways that you know of currently, before you've even done your research, of where you may want to go. I would always think of cases ahead of time, and I would never use those cases after I was done with my research, because you find better cases. And some of the cases you think are out there aren't really cases. They've already been done, or they create more problems, which is, a haven for negatives to beat you all the time. So let's just think about analyzing the topic, the resolution. So when it's your time this week and this weekend over Thanksgiving break to really analyze the resolution, you want to be thinking about the issues, and you have to know the issues, and we're going to talk about the issues, but you really have to do the research on your own in the beginning, because you're going to have to take your own perspective on this. All right, general policy research. So where to begin? After you've done your resolutional analysis and you understand, what your burdens pretty much are, or you think you understand, then you're going to just start doing searches, right? And you can use any type of search engine. I would generally begin with Google or some of my sources for extemporaneous speaking, such as the Washington Post, or I would go to think tanks, such as the Cato Institute or the Brookings Institute, never the Heritage Institute, unless I was looking for negative evidence, or something that was just an out-of-the-box position that I personally would never run. But some folks go straight there. And what you do is you go into those places and you start entering terms of the resolution into the search menu. It's as easy as going to Google and putting in fiscal redistribution, learning what that is, typing universal basic income into Google, seeing what that is, entering in Social Security. And you'll get a lot when it comes to Social Security. A lot of the places to find the general evidence are sites that have .gov, but also some of those sites may not have any advocacy. And some of them may have too much advocacy that you agree or disagree with. The main point is that you want to start your sources, you want to start your searches in a legitimate place to where you are able to gather the best evidence, all right? So you say to yourself, well, Coach Stacy did not say this was law school. He actually said this is not law school. What does he mean evidence? Well, we do need evidence, right? You need ways to prove your argument is true. And the way that you start that is by using evidence. So we begin with evidence, and then your analysis is based upon the evidence, right? So we're not expected to be experts on fiscal redistribution, on universal basic income, Social Security, or federal jobs guarantees. But what you are expected to do is do a lot of research to where you can become an expert. And that begins with evidence, right? So you want to make sure you have all of the evidence out there. And I'm going to say this, and some of you, most of you, all of you who've never done debate, especially if you're middle school or you're late elementary school, this is intimidating. It's intimidating for adults, right? For Congress people, for mayors, for senators. You have to read everything out there about the topic. That's going to take time. But where you want to start is you want to start by understanding evidence that examines the problem, the stock issues. And you want to look at evidence that also examines the solvency by framing your research through the stock issues paradigm. You mainly want to look for evidence that proves that there is a problem or says there's not a problem. Okay? And that begins with having legitimate sources. Because this is debate, having a legitimate source is subjective. And what I mean by subjective is it's up to you, it's up to the individual. Now, we can discern and kind of try and decide some sources are just not legitimate. Like, you're not going to look to a Sports Illustrated article to talk about this. But you may look to someone who's an athlete who had issues with their income or who's on Social Security, right? So you could hear narratives and evidence everywhere about this topic, especially fiscal redistribution, because that's how things are done in the NFL, right? That's how things are done in some socialist countries. Even the United States is socialist when it comes to corporations. But see, that's all a debate, right? So sources comes down to who you believe are qualified sources. We will set the standard for what we believe are qualified sources. I'll give you a list of sources where you can go and find evidence, and then you'll just have to find your own because they're infinite as far as the number of, they seem infinite as far as the number of experts who will give you policy analysis on the topic. But you want to start with sources that talk about the problem because you're starting at the harm, right? Why would someone want a universal basic income? What would justify having a federal jobs guarantee? Why do we need to increase Social Security? And why do we need to do this through a lens of or through a mechanism of fiscal redistribution led by the US federal government? Right? So all of those justifications, that reasoning, that analysis, all those things are going to come through reading and doing your research, okay? Basically, the sources give you the why, the how. They answer the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, okay? And then the how, I guess. So I guess it's the 4 W's. But anyway, make sure you use legitimate sources. We're going to allow you to call out your opponent for using what we think are illegitimate sources or biased sources or unqualified sources, and never cheat and use yourself as a source. Don't change the evidence, right? We'll have an entire lecture series on ethics in debate, and let the evidence say what it says. Don't try to hide the evidence. In the long term, we all want to be familiar with this issue from an expert standpoint, not because we manipulated the sources, but because we learned all of the sources from everyone's perspective and we understand them all, and we're able to draw conclusions based upon that. All right. Now, this is one of the most fun parts of writing an affirmative case, and some judges, mostly newer judges, don't believe in doing this. In my opinion, it's because it takes a lot of work, right? It's searching for an author advocate and selecting a plan. Now, in order to prove that you can solve the harms, that you can solve the problem, and by now everyone should at least have a basic understanding of the stock issues, you need to have an expert in the field who is an author advocate. Now, oftentimes you'll go to, let's say, CNN.com, and it'll have an article from a staff writer. You usually don't want to use articles like that. CNN, maybe not CNN. That's an entire lecture for another day. But you want to make sure that the author has credibility and that you can see their first and last name, that you can see all of their qualifications. Generally, if you click on the link to their name, you don't want to just use a source that is attributed to a website, because that may not be written by a credible person. It may be written by a bot. It may be written by a child. It may be written by someone who is actually on the other side of the issue and they're giving you disinformation. So make sure that you select qualified sources and advocates. And also, those people are going to specify a specific plan for you to do, right? They're going to talk about your plan, and your plan is going to come from these authors. Most of the time, you're not going to be able to think of a plan to solve the problem. You're going to learn about that through your general policy research and analyzing the resolution, through reading about the topic. And then you're going to select a plan. You're going to say, oh, that's a plan that I think can solve it because an expert has told you that this can solve this. All right. Now, sometimes you'll come up with your own plan and you'll find an advocate to support that plan. Oftentimes that happens later when you're a more experienced debater, but sometimes it could happen in the beginning, especially if the issue is something that you have experience with. In our league, you have to have an author advocate. If your opponent calls you out for claiming solvency evidence that's not based upon an expert's advocacy, then you could lose the round. But that depends on the judge, right? The judge may not have a clue. So it's all about you selling your arguments and about your opponent selling the arguments and making those arguments to make sure that you do everything you're supposed to. But doing your job, you make sure that you have that author advocate. And that's just an expert from MSNBC, from The Economist, from the Wall Street Journal, right? From a lot of think tanks. So a lot of universities have very good think tanks and very good policy journals that we will select a lot of our evidence from. So for example, if you go to Washington University or St. Louis University here, they have tons of evidence from professors and from graduate students who are educated folks, and they will give you evidence and they will give you policy solutions to problems. There are also a lot of advocates that are supported by millionaires and billionaires, companies, folks with huge agendas that pay people to do policy research. You want to find out those sources and find out who those people are. I'll point you to some of them. I will definitely correct you from using bad sources, but it's up to you to find good sources. And it's up to your opponent to tell you whether the sources are bad, qualified, or just something frivolous that was thrown onto a website and put together to, I don't know, for a specific agenda other than solving the problem. That's very important to find that advocate. So as you're reading the evidence, you're going to notice. You're going to notice that the authors oftentimes begin the articles talking about the harms, or they'll talk about the plan. When you're reading through this evidence, you want to make sure that you are labeling. And we used to print everything out, but you all aren't going to do that. You're going to have more digital articles. So you're going to have to cut and paste portions of that article into a Word document that says harms, plan, inherency, solvency. And you're going to have to cite that evidence. Or you can just, cut the website and put the title of the website and write it down and say, this is a good article that talked about the harms. This is an excellent article that talked about the problems if we gave a universal basic income and how that would lead to lethargy and welfare state increasing and all these other things, right? Or you could, have an article that says, look, older people need more Social Security. And if they don't have this, then it's going to impact generations and create more poverty and entrench poverty. And that creates worse problems. And you really want to remember that? Well, you want to cut and paste that to a certain point and put that where you think that could be. Because later on, we're going to organize all the evidence into a specific format and structure that is going to force you to choose the best evidence. So right now, you're just kind of organizing evidence where you think it should go. The main thing is you want to read it and you want to be mindful of the fact that you're searching for a harms card that talks about the problem. You want to make sure that you find cards that give you inherency, because you want to know that if there's a problem, there's a reason we're not solving it. And sometimes you have to look for a few hours, a few days, sometimes only a few minutes to find an inherency card, right? And when I say card, I mean evidence. I mean, you take a sample of an article and you don't only cut what you want people to hear, you cut a general size of it. And what I mean by cut is that you're going to cut and paste from the article and paste it into your debate case. And that is going to be a summary. And then you're going to give a main idea to tell us what that means. And then you're going to cite that evidence. It's all in a very specific manner that you have to do. Okay. And citing the sources is one of the most important things after you find it. So after you've cited your sources properly and you know how to give the main idea in the evidence, and we'll go through this. This is going to take us a little time, a few hours, right? If we were to be at debate camp or our Summer Forensics Institute, after lunch, about 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours, you would know how to look for articles. We'd be writing debate cases after lunch, right? We'd be doing other drills, and we'd be going over every stock issue in a lab of its own. So we're trying to break these things down over, a week, over one class per week. So it's a little more difficult for us to be able to give this to you in a streamlined manner, but you're going to get all of it. And actually, I think it may be better because you have more time to learn the difficult things before I expect you to have a mastery of this. The case structure and outline is something I expect you to have a mastery of. My students will present their cases in a professional manner. I don't care if you're sixth, seventh grade. I have fifth graders. I have second graders. We do write different types of cases. I expect a lot from my middle school students because I will give you examples. I will show you how to do it. When you write your own cases, I expect you to be able to write in a professional manner and to be able to cite sources professionally. And that's all based upon your outline. So you want to know now that outlining is important. It's important here. It's important in all your classes when you're writing essays, especially English language arts. You're going to be expected to outline here in speech and debate, and no one's too cool to outline. Okay, no one's too smart or has such a great memory or such a great writer where you don't brainstorm and begin with an outline. You will always begin with an outline here before you write something, before you order your thoughts and present them. Okay, we do the outlining for novices toward the end of affirmative case writing, but once you get used to it, you'll outline first. Okay, the structure is very specific. And if it's not specific and if it's not structured, it muddles the whole debate between you and your opponent. It annoys the judge, and you can lose based upon it just because you're not organized. I remember a tournament I was at where I wasn't typing my cases appropriately, and I was kind of handwriting some of the evidence or some of the sources, and I was cutting literally with scissors and using tape, and it just was real sloppy. But sometimes you have to do that because when you're changing things on the fly, the main thing is you want to make copies and you want to type that up into a Word document to look professional. Well, I was cutting corners and I lost a debate round because of it. The judge kind of looked at both of our evidence stacks and they were just like, "Can I see the evidence?" and gave it to him. And it was just like, Nowadays, you all especially will have a paper copy of your debate case and you will have an electronic copy that your opponent and the judge will have. So you want to make sure that electronic copy that's on a Word document or in a Google Doc is professional. You want to make sure that the font size and everything about the margins and when you use bold, when you use italics is professional, because if you don't, it's going to cause problems. You more than likely won't communicate professionalism and you may lose. All right, so the outline is usually based on a very specific outline. So the stock issues, harms, inherency, plan and solvency, and then advantages if you have advantages. This is a needs-based case. There are other cases such as a comparative advantage case and a goals case. Those would be for more advanced debaters, so you'll be writing those next year. But for now, the needs-based cases focus on the need. So you want to talk about the needs first, and that begins with the harm, which is the problem. Why do we need this affirmative case? It's because there's such a big problem, okay? And you're going to disagree and agree, and you have your own interpretation about how to tell the story with the evidence you gathered. That's up to you. I'll help you. I may give suggestions. It's up to you to do your own work. I'm not going to do it for you, right? I'll give you all a case this week where you'll look at it. You'll understand what a case is, but you're going to write your own cases. And so you'll determine what needs are most important. And your opponent's going to call you out for, prioritizing certain things over the other. And your job is to call them out about why this should be prioritized. And not just call them out, but debate and argue to get to the best solution, to get to the highest truth about what's best for us to do. And it begins with ordering that evidence in a logical, clear manner. It has to be clear and logical, okay? You don't want to have a harms card at the top and a harms card at the bottom. No, each stock issue is its own portion of that debate case. And you all have seen some debate cases, so you know they can look long. But as you get through them and as you read them, you're going to wish you had more time, I promise you. Every debater says that. Right now it's intimidating and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so much stuff. Especially because I'm not giving you, baby words or material typical for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade readers. I'm giving you things that are above your level because we're going to read this evidence over and over and over and over and over. And you're going to understand it and you're going to study on your own as much as possible. And we're going to work through that. And you're going to recognize that it's important for me to do this stuff. But applying it to your regular everyday classwork is what's really going to demonstrate the genius in the work that you've been doing. But it takes a lot to get there. We're starting here, and it has to be ordered in the right way. It has to be organized. And the way that it's ordered and organized is through a stock issues paradigm. You have an example case to look at, and I've given it to you. So the harms come first. Inherency comes second. Plan is next. Solvency. And then advantages if you have them. All right. So once that case is ordered and you've made sure that all the sources are cited properly, and that you have bold or italics or wherever you're supposed to, and you can distinguish the sources from the evidence, and you know you have none of your personal analysis in the affirmative case, which is what a lot of debaters do. They type in answers into the case, and that's unethical, because we need, as judges, to be able to distinguish your analysis from the author's analysis. Okay, what you wrote versus what she wrote. And if we can't tell what you wrote versus what she wrote, then you're more than likely going to lose points. And I'm going to look at it as you're being unethical. I'm not saying you're cheating, but don't try to pull game and run game on us, right? Like, we know when you're cheating, because I'm going to read all the evidence. Like, I read all the evidence. Even if you produce it, I read it all, because that's what I like to do, right? And your opponent's going to read it. So make sure that you don't misrepresent. Now, after all that's done, and you have this very nice, beautiful affirmative case, you time the case, you read it, and you make sure it's within the proper time. For our debate league, I think our time is going to be 6 to 8 minutes, or 6 to 7 minutes. So you probably will have a lot of time. Most of you are going to find that to be very challenging in the beginning. Some of you are going to love it. It's not a problem. All of you will have to do it, and you have to time your cases, and you can't go over time. They have to be within time, because everyone has a specified amount of time in which they speak for every speech. So your opponent's going to get up and refute your case. They have a specified time. You're going to get up and answer that refutation in a rebuttal speech. You have a specified time and a specified manner in which you deliver that speech. You don't just get up talking, okay? So it's important for you to have that speech time, to know how long it takes you to deliver every card, every piece of evidence. And you want to memorize it as best as possible. Oh no, did he just say memorize? Yes. Now, you're not expected to have it memorized in policy debate. No. But the more you read it, you will have it memorized, okay? Other events are memorization based, and you will have to memorize 10 minutes worth of material, 2,500, 2,000 words. It's just required. If you don't have it memorized, you'll lose, all right? But memorize to the best. And in debate, we kind of say you kind of remember it really well, other than memorizing. Other events, you want to memorize it and not have it remembered really, really well. You want to memorize it, just like one of your favorite songs. Exactly. And not one of those songs where you think you know the words and you find out 10 years later that's not what the artist was saying. It was one of those songs you know all the words to, okay? And then you debate. Then we're going to start debating. So we're going to have some practice debates this week. We're going to do some things we're going to do impromptu speaking. We're going to do some other stuff to get you ready to start debating. But the foundation of that for the policy debate class is to have an affirmative case written. If you have any questions, you can hit me up anytime on the phone. You can send me an email. That's probably the best way to contact me. And I would look on YouTube, and I would find other debates, and I would find other debate sources, and just learn a lot about it, because there's a lot of good debate out there. There's a lot of bad debate. You'll be able to distinguish what I want you to do, and you may learn something. And there's nothing wrong with learning from other smart people and people that have done this before and that are successful. So good luck to you. We're all going to be expected to have affirmative cases written by the week of the 27th. If you do not have an affirmative case written by the week of the 27th, you have to use the affirmative case, and you will be required to have one written before that next Monday. If not, you can't participate, right? It's kind of like asking you to bring your football pads to football practice because we're out of spring training and we're ready to do hitting drills, and you refuse to bring your football pads. Just can't do it, right? Can't serve Girl Scout cookies if you don't bring the cookies. So in this instance, your debate case, your affirmative case, that is your ball, those are the cookies, that is your instrument in the band class. It is required. I will give you one. It will not be good enough for you to use in competition. It will intentionally have holes in it for us to practice with. It's a learning tool. All right. Good luck to everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to review this video. It's very important for us to know these skills. Good luck. We're turning into champions. Speak, listen, grow. Do the hard work. Do the hard work. The rewards and the glory come later. All right. See ya.